Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Death Holler. I'm your host, the Reverend Dr. Death, and joining me reluctantly again is my co-host, Llareyna. We are investigating the history of zombies in this episode, kind of getting down to the main roots of the actual monster before the Romero zombie reinvented the whole damn thing. What do you think about the topic for today? Do these type of zombies scare you at all, Llareyna? The voodoo zombies?
No, as a matter of fact, they intrigue me. And I'm going to have to say, okay, first, and this is a little behind the scenes. Everyone's just going to have to hear this. But we're releasing the Christmas zombies first, right?
As far as I'm aware of,
yeah,
yes.
because we have to, because Christmas week is this week. So, okay. So moving forward then, these zombies intrigue me. And it's funny because I've actually heard probably at least 3 memorable podcasts about one of these movies in specific, and in general, specifically though, and I knew exactly what it was about, and not scared, but I am going to say that based off of the 2 episodes we've done already, or it's going to be 4 technically, zombie season is kicking off to a really good start for me. You're really luring me in. You know, like you hear about those people that have that first kid and it's like the perfect child. You're like, oh, this is great. I could do this again. And then they have that second kid and it's just the absolute devil. I feel like that's what I need to prepare myself for. This is like the calm before the storm.
When you say absolute devil, are you talking about now as far as the scare factor or the shit factor of the movie quality itself?
Scare factor for me. Scare factor for sure. I'm not worried about shit factor. We're gonna see shitty zombie movies. I'm not I've seen shitty zombie movies, but even some of the shitty ones get me good with the scares. Like we talked about Z Nation, and those got me with scares. That's how stupid I am when it comes to zombie films.
Yeah, when we get into the Romero zombies, even if the first movie, which I can see it not having that effect because of its age, the Tom Savini remake, you're going to already get in zombie hell with that one. So it's going to be quick.
Are you talking about Night of the Living Dead?
Yes.
This is a spoiler alert right now. The original Night of the Living Dead is the original zombie movie that scared me, and to this day it will be on, and that movie still fucking chills me to my bones. I don't like it. I mean, I like it, but I don't like the way it makes me feel.
And you were talking about the black and white one again.
The black and white one.
Okay, cool. It's actually pretty good for what it is.
It's good, yeah. And we are spoiler alerting it, but
all right. The zombie as we know it today is a relatively new monster. The lore and rules dating back only 55 years as opposed to some of these others that go back centuries. It is both the most blue collar of movie monsters and also the most reviled by critics, perhaps owing to the abundance of poorly made films, as we have discussed, featuring the creature. We will be covering as much as possible anyway, all the variants of this undead plague, beginning this episode with a Vodun zombie, or voodoo zombie, as we bastardize it in the white Western culture. That was the first written about in travelogues about Haiti.
Wow.
So lock your doors, keep the salt handy, and join us as we discuss the black and white classic White Zombie and the 1988 Wes Craven film, The Serpent and the Rainbow. If you're enjoying this podcast, we would appreciate it if you could take the time to like, comment, subscribe on whatever podcast platform you prefer. It helps us get more visibility on podcast listings and helps us grow. Also, consider following us on social media. You can find us on TikTok and Twitter under Death Holler Pod, and we can be found on Instagram and Facebook under Death Holler Podcast. We appreciate everyone who listens and hope you enjoy the show. How about we attack some bees while we're at it?
We'll attack some bees. Zombies.
What is that? What is that? What is it? Oh, no, not the bees! Not the bees! Ah! Open my eyes!
You know you have to change it to Attack of the Zombies now, right?
I do. Now that you said that, I'm going to have to say it. That's pretty good, actually. This episode we're covering, which is not actually the worst zombie movies we'll ever see, but a couple of classic ones: The Ghost Breakers from 1940 and King of the Zombies from 1941. And
I know how you do it.
The first one, The Ghost Breakers, which does sound like it should be a zombie movie given its name, but it technically is, has a tagline, "Funny enough to make even a ghost laugh." Hey, it's the 40s, people.
Yeah, that is true.
Directed by George Marshall, written by Walter de Leon, Paul Dickey, and Charles W. Goddard. Music by Ernst Toch. Principal players, we have Bob Hope. You know, some of the older folks might remember him. Playing Larry Lawrence is his name. It's Larry L. Lawrence. He was named Larry 3 times. Who is the radio host / cowardly lion of the movie. It's kind of interesting because he's a radio host that reports on the mafia because he has inside sources, and he thinks that's fine. But then, like, he's reporting on them at the beginning of the movie, the start of this movie, and he says some shit that one of the guys that he reports on doesn't like, and so he kind of gets in a bad way with the people that that he reports on. That's kind of what happens when you walk the razor thin knife that is the mafia. If you're you might be buddy with them 1 minute, but it doesn't take much to piss them off and then put you on the hit list.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, is he incognito? Clearly he's not, but I thought for a minute he might be incognito because you can't be talking about them like that. They don't like that.
No, he brags about the fact that he's got like this relationship with them, and they're like, "Are you sure you want to report about this?" And he's like, "Yeah, they're friends of mine." And then he says something that pisses one of them off. So he's kind of dumb in that sense.
Yeah.
Paulette Goddard plays Mary Carter, the inheritor of a haunted castle, and she's the love interest in the movie. She's kind of a cutie for back in the 40s day. I mean, she's kind of got that classic, female, heroine look about her. Willie Best plays Alex, which is Larry's manservant, and that's where we start running into the racial issues that these movies have from back in that day. Having a black manservant, for a white guy, it doesn't have the best look or sound, just saying. And then Noble Johnson plays the zombie in the movie, the one that, makes it technically a zombie movie. And he's technically the first truly undead-looking voodoo zombie. So they did a pretty good job in this movie of actually making him look disfigured and, like, kind of spooky looking. He was a big, tall guy, too, so it kind of made him more imposing whenever he was chasing after the main actors. That's the only part in the movie that's actually considered a horror part of the movie, is that he's, chasing after her for this extended sequence, and it's just the two of them, and it's got a little bit of horror to it. The rest of it's just Bob Hope and Willie Best kind of, being chicken shits and saying, shit about, like, it's like, you go, and it's like, no, you go first. They might get you first, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
King of the Zombies has a tagline of human sacrifices, savage torture, and voodoo rites. And it's descriptive.
So and straightforward.
Yeah, it describes the movie to a certain extent. Directed by Gene Yarborough, written by Edmund Kelso, music by Edward J. Kay. Principal players is Dick Purcell playing James McCarthy, who's the pilot in the movie. John Archer plays Bill Summers, who's the bland white everyman who's just kind of there. He's supposed to be the hero of the piece. Mantan Moreland plays Jefferson Jeff Jackson, who is the titular king of the zombies, and Bill's valet. Again, it's another, black man serving a white man type situation in the movie. Mantan Moreland, though, he's pretty fucking funny for what he does in the movie. Now, he would be called some names nowadays by especially people in the black community because he, definitely playing that cowardly black man that's always, like, yes, sir, type situation. But he's got some funny lines in the movie. I got to give him that. He had some good comedic timing, and the reason they hired him, I think, is because out of all the actors that I've ever seen, like, he can open his eyes up and actually, it's almost like his eyes are popping out of his fucking head. So whenever he's supposed to be scared, like, he really, can play that off. We have Joan Woodbury playing the Barbara Winslow, who's a hypnotist, and Henry Victor, who was in the movie Freaks, the old-timey movie about the carnival folks, is playing Dr. Miklos Sangre, who is a Nazi scientist. So this movie actually has the whole Nazi zombie combination going on a little bit.
Before Call of Duty.
Yeah. It's a Nazi scientist trying to using hypnotism and using like voodoo rites to try to, get this undead army to kind of help out and actually establish control of the Caribbean so that they could, take over or have a landing point to fight the U.S. from. Is kind of what it's based on. The both movies, I would say it this way: Ghostbreakers is clearly the better made movie. It had the bigger budget. It was made by it was one of the big companies. Is Paramount, Universal, one of those. It's almost exactly a comedy / mafia drama. If it's anything, the zombies in the haunted castle don't even come into it till like the last 20 minutes or 30 minutes of the movie. King of the Zombies is way more campy, low budget. But it's actually, they land on an island of the Caribbean, and right from the get go, it's, they're dealing with zombies and all kinds of stuff. So I'm kind of mixed on these. One's a better made movie and has better jokes, but I mean, King of the Zombies, I like it for the camp, and it's actually, and the whole thing about the Nazi scientist is interesting considering how early it was, for doing that.
Yeah.
As far as the Nick Cage rating for these, I'm going to give it the Werewolf Women of the SS from Grindhouse, because Nick Cage plays Fu Manchu in that, so he's a white man appropriating a Asian character, and that kind of racism is exactly what's kind of going on in these movies. So there you go. It's and the campiness of it, at least. So
it's bad enough that we're doing a zombie season. I am not going to be participating in that.
I mean, we got to acknowledge it. I mean, there's clearly some, bad takes going on in these movies from the 40s. Like these, it's from a different time, that's just what it is.
Oh my goodness.
Doesn't make the movie better either. I mean, it's kind of actually cringe at times whenever you're watching it and you're just like, this doesn't play well now. Not at all.
Yeah. They weren't thinking about that back then though. So,
Well, it wasn't that big of a deal back then. Well, it was starting to be, but they didn't care until a few years later. So, moving on, we're going to go to our first movie of the evening. White Zombie from 1932. Tagline: with these zombie eyes, he rendered her powerless. With this zombie grip, he made her perform his every desire.
That is nasty.
I picked that because, yes, they really laid into the sexual stuff in this one, as far as like what Bela Lugosi's character has intended for his white zombie in the movie.
Holy shit.
Yeah, I mean, I'll get to it a little bit later. There's a line that he says, and he clearly indicates what he has planned for her, and he's sick fuck. That's all I can say. Directed by Victor Halperin, written by Garnet Weston, who did the screenplay, but based upon the novel by William B. Seabrook. Garnet Weston was a pulp comic writer. He wrote stuff that you would probably kind of find in like Tales of Wonder and like EC Comics and shit like that. He wrote the screenplay for this, so that's kind of why it's got a little bit of that, larger than life vibe about it, I think. Music by Guy Bevier, made for a budget of $50,000. Now get this, it made $8 million.
Back then, that's insane. What is that in today's times?
I don't know if that's adjusted for inflation or not, but if it's not adjusted for inflation, you're talking several $100 million at least. I mean, at least is what that amounts to. Even if not, it was only made for $50,000 and it made $8 million. So that's a damn good return by anybody's metric,
Hold on, I'm looking right now. What year was it made? 1930 what?
1932 is when it came out.
Okay. See if I can get.
I want to say it came out 1 year after Dracula, of all things.
I mean, if we're being honest, it looks like a Dracula film.
There's a lot of Dracula stuff in this. I mean, the way that he hypnotizes people with his eyes, the way he carries himself. I mean, there's a lot of that, and I think that's the reason they got Bela Lugosi. A little bit of trivia about that, though. Bela Lugosi was a notoriously bad businessman. He was by all accounts, a pretty decent actor for the time, but he never knew how to negotiate his contracts. And I guess he didn't really trust anybody to do that for him, or they might not have had the option back then. He got the equivalent of, like, I want to say $800 or something like that to, like, I mean, well, it might have been more than that, but it was like just in the thousands to play both Dracula and this character. And then whenever he saw, and he turned down the option to get back in profits off of it. And then when he saw how much profit the movie made whenever it was out, then he fucking got pissed, but it's like, dude, you had the option of taking the back end profits. Why didn't you do it? You know?
Okay. So I'm just going to wiki break it down simple. 8 million in 1913 is worth 245 million in today's times.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's not adjusted. If it's not, I didn't look into it, but and Bela Lugosi, I mean, because we'll get back to him at some other point when we cover the vampire season.
What? Him and a vampire? I can't even see it.
Yeah, it's not a thing. It's not like all the vampires in history are based upon his particular accent either. The thing about him is that he died pretty much penniless. Doing movies for fucking Ed Wood. I mean, if you've watched that, Johnny Depp, Tim Burton movie, Ed Wood, they have Bela Lugosi in there, and he's, a very broken man, just working. I mean, he barely can afford his house, and that's the reason he agrees to do Plan 9 from Outer Space. So,
fuck, dude, that's sad. I never watched Ed Wood. Shocker.
It's pretty good because it's like it's almost like a documentary about filmmaking back in the day.
Yeah.
And I mean, between him and Vampira being in the movie, it's a pretty good insight into them as people, like behind the scenes,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he was on drugs at the time too. Lugosi was in the movie because he just, throughout, just got to that point where, I mean, he was just destitute, and that was kind of where he was at. But
God damn, Vampira is so hot.
So principal players, as we mentioned, Bela Lugosi playing, get this, that his name in the movie is Murder Legendre.
Yeah. I liked that. I'm not going to lie.
That's a pretty fucking badass name. I mean, if we're going to, who's the zombie master? Of course, he was in Dracula from 1931. A lot of people don't realize he's also in The Wolfman. He plays one of the gypsies that, is in the camp or whatever. Island of Lost Souls, The Black Cat, Glen or Glenda, which is another movie that Ed Wood did. The Raven, Plan 9 from Outer Space, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, and then, of course, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, where he actually played Frankenstein. Him and he had an ongoing rivalry with Boris Karloff. I don't know why the two of them each other, like they hated each other, and I don't know if it was directly hate, but they really competed for the same roles for a long time.
Yeah.
Madge Bellamy plays Madeline Short Parker, who is the titular white zombie of the movie. And this is a little bit of an interesting thing about Madge Bellamy. I can't remember. Pistol Packing Madge is what they called her. And the reason they called her that was because later in life, she shot at her man because he broke off the relationship, and she caught him with somebody else. And so she shot him 3 times and wounded him. But when they took her to court, she said, listen, I'm a crack shot, and I only wanted to scare him. So if I wanted him dead, he would have been dead. That was her defense.
Fuck yeah. She's my hero.
This little woman. What do
you mean, this little woman? We don't, I mean, like, if we're going to fight, she's right. We're going to fight to kill, because one strike the wrong way, one punch, and we're going down. So he better be asleep. She's going to have to poison him. She's going to have to shoot him. This little woman needed to do what she had to do, and I support her.
She followed him after they broke up just to shoot at him. So
Fuck
I don't know how much she needed to do that.
Hell yeah.
Okay. I thought you would like that story about her.
Maybe next time he'll think before he cheats.
That actually sounds like a country song. If
She might have saved a little trouble for the next girl.
The funny thing about Madge, other than that, is that she was actually a silent film star way before she did this movie. This was actually her first talkie that she ever did. And she was in movies like Lorna Doone, Lazy Bones, Black Paradise, and the Iron Horse. And the reason I say that's funny is because when they went to movies that actually had speech, she ended up having this little squeaky mouse voice.
Oh,
that
yeah.
you can kind of hear in the movie, and it wasn't good for a film that required speech, you know?
Yeah.
As well as things where she was pretty, but then when she
Yeah,
talked, it's
she's
like,
gorgeous.
oh, okay.
You know, voice acting, it is a thing. I've not taken it, but I do know that I can change the pitch and the tone of my voice. Everybody can, you know?
Yeah, there's actually some actress. Well, one of them I'm thinking of is is one of the ones off Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Now, if you ever hear her talk as Rosa on the show, like she's got this deep, like kind of almost sexy voice when she's speaking as Rosa. When you hear her talk in real life, she's got a squeaky mouse voice, just like Madge would have. And it's hilarious because it's like, wait, she does that voice as Rosa, and that's what she sounds like. It's really weird, but
that's fucking wild.
Also in this movie is John Herron playing Neil Parker, who's the husband of Madeline and the nervous hero who's basically fainting at every moment and opportunity he can throughout the film. He's having anxiety attacks, okay? Let him live.
Oh, blow me.
He was in Dulcie, Penrod, and The Street Girl. Like, you're not going to know the names of these movies.
No.
A lot of them are older than dirt.
Definitely not me. I don't know about y'all.
Robert Fraser plays Charles Beaumont, who's the rich American expatriate who has the hots for Madeline and decides to go about getting her in a very sick and twisted way. He played in The Vampire Bat, The Scarlet West, and Back to God's Country. Joseph Cawthorne played Dr. Bruner, who's the missionary, and he just likes a good smoke because that's all he ever. That's how he.
Yeah.
All he ever does in the movie. He's like,
I don't even think he eats.
You know?
He might drink, but smoking is what he's doing.
That's what he prefers, and maybe he's smoking some of the good stuff from down there. We don't know.
It's possible.
He was in Love Me Tonight, Street Girl, and The Taming of the Shrew.
Okay, so that's the second person in Street Girl.
Yeah, yep. I was hoping you'd catch that.
Yeah.
Brandon Hurst plays Silver, who is Beaumont's butler. He was in The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Okay.
The Man Who Laughs, which The Man Who Laughs is the movie that actually inspired the Joker, because the villain in that is actually, if you look at him and the Joker, the Joker was clearly based on the bad guy in that movie. Okay. And Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Oh my God, 100% Joker, but I am going to tell you what, he is creepy as fuck.
He is creepy as fuck.
Holy shit. But yeah, he's absolutely the Joker.
Yeah, whenever they made that comic, which came out shortly after that, it was clearly based upon that character. I want to say he's got a weird name like Gwen something or whatever. But anyways, Annette Stone plays the maid, or one of them, and then Velma Gresham plays the tall maid. And
okay.
And then Claire, well, I bring them up because it's kind of funny when they're trying to comb Madeline's hair, and they're clearly disgusted by it because it's a dead woman's hair, and they're like, should I even touch this fucking thing, you know? And then the other one's like, basically like, well, if you don't want to become like her, then yeah, you better get to combing her hair, you stupid bitch. You know, that's basically what it amounts to.
Stupid whore.
And then Clarence Muse plays the coach driver who doesn't care for zombies, and he gets the fuck out of there, rightfully so, whenever he sees them. So
yeah, GTFO. Nobody knows that. Nobody does that in zombie films.
I mean, he's the smartest guy in the movie. It's like when he sees them, he's like, zombies, and he gets the fuck out of there.
Yeah,
you know.
Bitch, bye.
Synopsis. A young American couple travels to a Haitian plantation to get married. The rich American expat that owns the plantation harbors an unrequited love for the bride-to-be and hatches a plan with a local zombie master to make her his own. The beautiful bride seemingly dies on the day of her wedding, and her body is later reanimated to be an obedient sex toy. But who ultimately pulls her strings, and can she be saved? Zombies toil for their master, Murder Legendre is a bastard, and Beaumont gets a taste of his own medicine. She was not dead, but she was also not alive.
Death becomes her.
Exactly. So a little bit of history before we get into this,
Nice.
talking about the, voodoo and all that stuff. And I'm going to say voodoo. I'm going to default to it because that's what I've been raised up to say. It's actually considered, from my understanding, to be, they hate that term. The people from down there, it's voodoo, and that's what they prefer it to be called. But I'm going to stick with what I was taught. So, hate me if you have to. But it's a mixture. The religion is a mixture of Catholicism and West African religion. One of the big components of it is they believe in two parts of the soul. So they believe in the gross, and I'm going to grossly, mispronounce these, but gross bon ange, which is the big good angel, and that's just your life force. That's what makes your body move. And then there's the T bon ange, which is the little good angel, and that's the part of your soul that actually gives you your personality. So the reason that's a big important factor of their religion is that when they have ceremonies to be possessed by spirits and allow the spirits to talk through them, technically your teen bonage, your little angel, your personality leaves, and you're just left with an animated body that the spirit can take over. The reason that's a big thing is because that's how they actually make a zombie, is because you lose your personality and it's just the animating force of your spirit that keeps you walking around, which is kind of a hellish thing to think about.
Yeah.
Haiti was a French colony in the Caribbean that imported West African slaves to use for sugar exportation. It was the early 1800s. They had a massive slave revolt, took power from the French, and forcibly freed the population. Other colonial powers sanctioned the island and cut it off from trade, which led to it being, very poor and really set it into years of poverty after that. But there was a lot of other colonies that had, still had slaves at that time. So they were afraid of the influence it would have on their nations if they, accepted it as a country. It is what it is, folks. It's history. I can't change it. So leadership of the island was also fractious and unstable. So it was constantly revolution after revolution, In 1915, U.S. sent Marines into the area to, in theory, secure the island and keep Germany from setting up a base there. So even in World War I,
quotation marks. I'm super sus about that.
I don't believe it either. And we're also talking about Woodrow Wilson, and he was one of the worst fucking people that we've ever had as a president. He got us into World War I for fucking bullshit reasons. That's a whole political rant. But anyways, he probably lied about this
newer.
Too. He probably lied about the reason that they were going down there. Let's be honest. But in theory, quotation marks, they sent them down there because it's like, Germany will set up a base there and they'll be right in our back door. So we've got to secure it.
We don't let no one up our back doors, not here in America.
Yeah. No, we don't believe in that sort of thing. It's funny you say that because that actually plays into Serpent and the Rainbow's history when we get to that about the backdoor stuff, but a different way.
Oh, okay.
But the problem is when they sent the Marines down there, they were supposed to just sit off the island and just kind of watch it. But when the islands went there, or the Marines went there and they saw the island and they saw like one of the current leaders being drugged down the street in a current revolt, they just moved onto the island and said, fuck this. We're going to give this place a little bit of boot in the ass, because that's the American way, as Toby Keith would say.
Yeah.
And that started years of U.S. occupation on the island, which was not appreciated by the islanders, as you would imagine. But
I don't blame them, but also colonization, man. Some people needed it.
The U.S. was going to bring it to you regardless.
Now, I know we talked about backdoor, and I want to reiterate, I said colonization, not colonization. So don't put words in my mouth and don't go up my back door.
Well, you're going to get some backdoor action when it comes to Serpent and the Rainbow. Sorry. Anyways, so that's the first setup for all this.
And wait. Before we move on from the difference between, how do you pronounce the first one? Not voodoo?
Voodoo.
Voodoo. Why is there an N in there?
Well, they pronounce it different ways. It's voodoo or voodoo.
What about hoodoo? Because
hoodoo is basically you take voodoo and then you move it to the south, in particular Louisiana.
Okay.
And you change it enough with not just the Catholicism, but I think you sprinkle in a little bit of Protestant, stuff in there, and it changes slightly, and you get hoodoo.
Okay, because I wanted more reiteration on that. Because I'm sorry, but Louisiana, I always associate with voodoo. I didn't know that hoodoo is what. Okay, it's just too much.
They got a little bit of mix of both later on, but it primarily their hoodoo is what they practice there, or at least they did for the longest time. So the English word of zombie, it's not really known where the origins came from, but it's thought to be from one of several root words. There's ombre in French, which means shadows. There's Jumbi in West Indian, that means ghost.
Okay.
There's Zumbi in African, Banda. And then there's Nzambi, I guess it's zombie because they leave off the end sound. So Zambi in Congo, and they both mean dead spirit. So you're getting the gist of this. It's basically it's more a ghost than it is anything else. I don't know why it came to mean what it does. And then there's finally Zemus, which is the soul of a dead person, which was in Haitian Arawak, which were the Indians or the Native Americans that lived there, or natives that lived there, I should say, prior to the slave population being imported in. So it's a mix of any of those, but that's where we get the word. It was officially documented in the Oxford English Dictionary in 1819, but didn't become popular until 1889. In the year that a journalist named Lafcadio Hearn, writing for Harper's Magazine, visited the island of Martinique for a Caribbean travelogue. And that's important because when he was down there, he heard a bunch of stories about what were called zombies. He went around and asked the locals what they were, and they basically gave him the runaround. They told him everything but what a zombie actually was, just to get him to fuck off.
I like it.
They told him it was a 3-legged horse that would pass you at night.
Yes.
It was a fire that moved closer, or it moved as you get closer to it at night. All these things happened at night because it was the bringer of chaos in the night's what they said it was.
Okay.
And then they said it was a dog that stood 5 feet high and entered your house in the nighttime, which is a frightening thing to think about, and it sounds like Skinwalker more than it does anything else. It wasn't until The Magic Island, written by William Seabrook, going back to what White Zombie's based on, in 1929, when we actually get what the zombie is. It was a collection of stories that the American explorer brought back from Haiti during the height of the U.S.'s control of the island. And Seabrook was a fucking odd person. He was good friends with Aleister Crowley, if you know who that is.
No, never heard of them.
Yeah, the leader of the Satanic Church. He was purported to carry whips and chains in his travel case because he was heavily into BDSM sex.
I wonder, I bet you he was heavily into getting beat, though,
No, he wasn't, because here's the story that came out about him.
Shit.
He had a photographer friend that visited him one time, and he told his friend before because he was out at the time, and he told his photographer friend, he's like, when you go in there's going to be a girl tied to the staircase. Leave her there. Don't let her free, until I get back. And when he went in there, there was actually a young woman with a soiled loincloth on. That's all she was wearing. That was tied to the staircase. Handcuffed there to be so he was into that shit. He liked it. And
that'd be not funny, but what if that were like an actual victim? Like, what if she were actually kidnapped? He's like, man, they're into some kinky shit, and she's just like, help me,
Well, this guy, you never know, because this is another story about him. When he was studying, this is after the Haitian stuff, he went to Africa. He wanted to study cannibals there. And he wanted to actually sample human flesh while he was there, but he didn't get a chance. So when he went back to Paris, which is where he stationed himself most of the time, because he was one of those bohemian Americans that like to lounge around in Paris, France, just, fucking around. He actually went to a morgue and asked them if they could shave off a pound of flesh from one of the dead bodies so that he could eat it. And he did get it, and he cooked it up, and he said that it tasted like bland pork with no seasoning on it.
Yeah. No. That's why I don't like pork.
He was the stereotypical white explorer in the 20s. Like, there's a picture of him when he was in Haiti, and he's got everything but the helmet that they used to wear back in the day. He's got khaki. He's got riding pants on, the ones that flare out at your hips.
Yeah.
He's got a khaki shirt, and he's got this big mustache or whatever that he's like, and he's got this look in his face like, fuck around and find out. It's basically what he looks like in the picture. He's hilarious.
Jesus.
So when Seabrook was on the island, he met with a Haitian farmer named Polynice, who was told that zombie workers were actually on a farm nearby. Polynice told Seabrook about a zombie master named Ty Joseph, who used zombies to collect bonuses from the Haitian American Sugar Company back, a few years before that. And the story was that he told him was that Ty only fed his zombies a special unsalted stew, because the rumor is if you get zombie salt, they revert back to their, the form that they get their little angel back, and they'll revolt on you. So you don't ever feed them salt. Ty was getting all of the bumper crop of these bonuses because his zombies worked day and night while everybody else actually had to take breaks. But it just so happened that this harvest was going on during carnival season. So he fucked off and went to Port-au-Prince and left his wife, Croyance, to watch after the zombies. Well, she was pissed off that he left her. So she hauled ass to the local town with the zombies in tow to celebrate. And while she was there, she felt bad for him. So she bought him some local candy, but it was laced with salt. So the zombies ate the salt, or the salted candy, started shuffling back to their hilltop homes, walked past their loved ones who were like, what the fuck is this? Watched them crawl back into their graves, supposedly. And then those families found out where Ty Joseph was at, hired assassins to kill him, and his head was cut off.
Hell yeah. I like this story.
So after telling him this story, of course, Seabrook was like, fuck yeah, I've got to see some zombies. Where are they at? And he took them to actually see them in this nearby field. And Seabrook was supposedly horrified when he looked in their eyes. He said that they clearly were like missing the spark of like any kind of, life about them. But he came to the conclusion even then that they weren't really dead. He said that they were under the sway of some kind of toxin that was causing them to sleepwalk.
Okay.
Is what he said.
And that's the thing, though. But they took themselves to their graves, so they believed they were dead, which is what I hear about these voodoo zombies.
And that's the thing. That's what happens. They believe that either it's a combination of it's so ingrained in the religion, or it's just because they're, they buy into it so much that they truly believe they're dead, even when they're not, because, that's what they've been told. This was interesting. So the ways that they prevented zombies in Haiti from forming was they either buried their dead under heavy masonry so that nobody could get to the bodies.
Okay.
They hired guards to watch the body for 24 hours after the burial if they were rich enough to do that. They buried bodies in busy roads so they were watched, which is what we see in White Zombie, the movie, because they're actually burying somebody next to a busy roadside, and that's what the coach driver, tells them. He's like, that way they're being watched by just regular people. And this is an interesting one. You put a bullet in the head of the body or poison it so that it cannot be raised. That putting a bullet in the head is interesting because that's funny that it works in the Romero zombies later on.
Well, I mean, okay, because they say that there's been explanations. I don't know if it was Resident Evil or whatnot, but you put a bullet through the brain, it severs the spinal cord or something like that, or something, and like it really just disables them.
Yeah, I think it's really cool that like even that part of the voodoo zombies like works its way into the the lore later on whenever it gets completely changed up.
Yeah, the poison doesn't make sense though unless you think it's not a zombie and you just want to make sure that person is dead.
But I think they kind of had an idea that's what was going on, without implying that it was, Some other taglines for the movie is they knew his friend was practicing zombieism on the natives, but when he tried it on a white girl, the nation revolted.
That sounds like a news article from today. Well, it was fine until they did it to the white woman.
It actually does sound like something that would happen today. An astounding story to hold you spellbound. The strangest love tale in 2,000 years, told on the borderland of life and death.
Ugh.
The zombies stole a white girl, and the Furies broke loose. But you'll know it never could happen. I love how this. It seems like it could happen. Like this is a title that could be now. They stole a white girl. You better watch it.
Yeah, it was fine. Like it was fine when he stole all the black girls, but then he stole one white girl, and it was over for them hoes. Everyone's looking for her. No one's looking for Banquiqui.
Starts where all other thrillers leave off, which whatever. That's
Okay.
the most generic thing ever.
Yeah.
The Dead Walk Among Us. That's actually a pretty good one. That sounds like it could have been a Romero.
I like that one.
tagline.
Yeah.
Stranger things are happening than you ever dreamed of.
Stranger Things.
Okay. This is the real thing. Unbelievable, shocking, true thriller. Okay. Foul traffic and dead bodies. And see them dug from the grave and put to work as slaves to murder.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Easy with the S word over there, okay?
Yeah, that's a little much. Some quotes from the movie. Madeline, driver, who were those men we saw? And then the coach driver, those are not men, madame. They're dead bodies.
They're cadavers.
They're cadavers, as we learned in Cadaver Christmas. Charles Beaumont, I thought that beauty alone would satisfy, but the soul is gone. I cannot bear those empty staring eyes. Well, bitch, you should have learned how to make her yours through the proper way of courting.
Yes, the proper channels.
Yeah. Neil Parker, who are you? Looks around at the zombies. And what are they? Legendre, for you, my friend, they are angels of death.
Also, they're cadavers.
They are cadavers, yes. Neil Parker, not dead, or you mad I saw her die. The doctor signed the certificate. I saw them bury her. And then Dr. Bruner, now wait a minute. I'm not mad, but I've lived in this island for many good years, and I've seen things with my eyes that made me think I was crazy. There's superstition in Haiti that the natives brought here from Africa. Some can be traced back as far as ancient Egypt, and beyond that yet in countries that was old when Egypt was young. I like that little bit of the story because it's almost like it's trying to say that zombies like date back to even Egypt or whatever, which is an interesting tie-in with like mummies and all that stuff.
It is because they thoroughly believed in the afterlife so much. It's like, okay, well, we're gonna bury your fucking wife with you, whether she's alive or not. You know,
and your horse, and your dog, and
your favorite pet, some food, some gold, like.
Charles Beaumont, forgive me, Madeline, forgive me. I can't bear it any longer. I must take you back. And then Legendre, back to the grave, monsieur. And then Charles Beaumont, no, you must put the life back into her eyes and bring laughter to her lips. She must be gay and happy again. and Legendre, you paint a charming picture, monsieur, one that I should like to see myself. You know, that's whenever you get the idea. He's got some. He's got his own, motives. All right, talking about the movie, I actually dig the whole like the setting that they've like got in this movie, like the big gothic like castle that they set it in and all that stuff.
Yes, I agree with that. It looked good. Everything looked good from the underground. I guess it's a mausoleum.
Yeah.
The mausoleum looked good. The cliff side of the castle, if you will. All that shit looked impressive.
Yeah, I mean, you can even tell they're kind of drop cloth like backgrounds, but the way that they design them, the artistry that went in them, they still look pretty damn fucking good. I mean, like even today.
Visually, nothing was upsetting in this movie, honestly.
No, I mean, the zombies are, there's not a whole lot to them, but like that one in particular, it's got the big bug eyes that keeps like walking toward I mean, he looks pretty freaky,
Yes, definitely. Also, I don't know how you watched this. I kind of forgot how I watched this. I know I watched it. Don't get mad at me, on my phone. Slow day at work, folks, okay? But the clarity of this film, I watched a little bit at my house too. I kind of rewatched some, scenes here and there. But the clarity of this film was shocking to me on how I was able to watch it. So
yeah, I watched it off of Tubi, and they've got two different ones, and one of them is like really well, they went back and like patched it up, made it look really well.
Okay, that makes sense because I'm like, fuck, like I don't know that I've seen a movie this old yet. Have I? What have you had me watch?
1931. I don't think we've watched one that old yet.
So I was like, wow, I've seen movies that are newer than this, not by much, that look like shit compared to how this one visually is showing.
I like what Lugosi looks like in this. I mean, he's skeezy as fuck in this one. That little shitty mustache he's got going on and the unibrow and everything. I mean, he skeezed up in this one pretty well. I mean, total departure from the slick, Dracula that he played just a year before this.
Okay, because I really thought he looked like Dracula.
No, well, I mean, if you go back and you watch Dracula, Dracula's like, got the slick back hair, like he's, well groomed and everything. Legendre like looks, he looks like he's just been lounging around with a bunch of fucking zombies.
Yeah, definitely.
I will say this: that one scene is is almost kind of creepy in a weird roundabout way. The scene in the where they're working in the mill and like one of them falls inside of the mill and they just grind it up with the rest of the stuff because they don't know any better.
Yeah,
and like the sound going on in it, the way they're just like going about it. It's kind of a creepy scene because there's no music to it at all.
Oh yeah, that was the music. It's a bone thumping good time.
Interesting thing about this movie was that the zombie thing took off. Well, of course, like these zombies represent, like, obviously, I mean, we always talk about there's kind of a social point about them. Voodoo zombies clearly represent like the fear of like losing oneself to like slavery and oppressive control. It's interesting. The reason this movie took off so well is because it came out right around the time that the Great Depression hit the U.S. so hard. And the U.S. watchers saw a totally different scene. In particular, that scene we was talking about in the mill where they're grinding themselves to death. Like U.S. workers were like working themselves to death for like scraps. So it was almost like they were seeing themselves as the zombies because of the bad economics and stuff, which we're not far from right now, folks, because we have a shitty president, but that's a whole other thing. So
it's also one of those things where in both of the films that we're reviewing, these I don't remember this one so much because the other movie's fresher in my head, but these voodoo zombies allegedly like mentally know what's going on but have no control. So they could see everything. They just can't respond the way that they would want to if they had control. Autonomy, if you will.
Yeah, you get a look. Well, I mean, in this one, they play it more like they're dead because the one gets shot several times at the end of it, and because he doesn't get shot in the head, he still keeps coming after Neil, which makes him like more, and he doesn't bleed, so he's like dead. But Madeline's different. She's like you're talking about. Like she recognizes, which makes it even worse, that she's being used sexually by Beaumont and maybe even Legendre both, because they, she wakes up. Like, I mean, they bring her back. Well, she wasn't officially killed. She was kind of, and that's the other thing that's interesting about this movie is that she was given a poison to make her appear dead, which is weird. They didn't know that's how they actually made zombies. But they figured it. But it's in this movie,
Yeah, I would say that Madeline, she was the Mina of this Dracula movie.
She was, yes.
100%. It totally, this movie, when I was watching, I'm like, this reminds me of Dracula so much. Now, I know it's not identical, but come on. The similarities are so fucking uncanny.
There is. And then you have like, and then, even Neil is like Jonathan Harker.
Yes, he's Harker.
Harker, like when he loses all that blood to the brides or whatever, and then like he's trying to get back to England, he's very weak, and it's just like Neil in this. Like he even passes out when he gets into the castle, and Legendre even like tries to, which is interesting. He uses Madeline to try to, he doesn't want to do it himself. He uses Madeline to stab Neil, which is like that speaks a lot about him as a character that he does it that way.
Yeah.
And then Beaumont, has that moment of like, oh shit, I fucked up, but it's too late. Cause I love that scene where he samples the drink and then he realizes, he's like, what the fuck? And he's like, how do you feel? Mr. Beaumont or Monsieur. And it's like, oh shit, he poisoned him. And like, he's got that whole scene where he's like, I've never actually spoken to someone who still has a little bit of their mind about them,
Dirty.
It's pretty good. I like that. And I mean, there's obviously, Rob Zombie named his band after this movie. I mean, it's White Zombie is because of this. So he clearly has an affection for the movie too, to a certain extent. The acting in the movie is, I mean, it's campy, it's out there, but like most of these movies from back in the day were like that because they went from stage plays to movies and stage to make the audience in the back of the theater be able to see you and understand you have to play everything more than you would normally in front of a camera. You have to, your movements have to be exaggerated. You have to speak, louder. And the very first movies kind of copied that before they figured out it's like, wait, we've got the camera in their fucking face. We don't have to do that anymore,
Well, yeah, and this movie 100% was like definite top-notch acting for that time. Look at how much money it grossed.
Yeah, it was pretty fucking good. I mean, it did damn good for the time. It's surprising that they didn't. It took them like 8 years to come up with a sequel, and the sequel had nothing to do with this movie. It was called Revolt of the Zombies, and the only thing that it did that was interesting was that it was set in Cambodia, and it used the idea of like a zombie army being raised up by a master, a zombie master, and it almost like the idea of zombie hordes marching toward you kind of maybe led into the Romero zombie, like later on. It kind of predated that a little bit, but that's the only thing interesting about the sequel they made to this. But it was actually the Rundown Studios that made King of the Zombies that actually took this and was like, hey, that made a lot of money. Let's do that shit, because we don't have to put a lot of effort into it. Times repeat themselves, folks. It's like every time you have a big, AAA title that makes a lot of money, then you have all the, Johnny come latelys come in there. It's like, hey, we can do this too for dirt cheap. Let's try this and see how much money we can get.
Yeah.
There wasn't, the interesting thing about this movie is there's not really a whole lot of music in the movie. There's a lot of silence in the movie, which is kind of creepy, really.
Yeah, I mean, they've got those, little orchestrated bits here and there.
A little bit, and then they have the voodoo chanting at times.
Yeah.
But, I mean, there's a lot of silence that plays pretty well in this movie.
Silent films used to be a thing, but then again, I guess silent films had a lot of music in the background to kind of set the tone or whatnot, but
they were all music. If you watch a silent film, it's like they never end the music, which is kind of a shitty thing too, because you're like, oh, come on now, this is wearing me down a little bit, guys, because they didn't have any other, way to convey the sound of it all.
I feel like, especially for the one actress who played Madeline, they were kind of transforming into a new era of films, and it's like, folks, we're speaking on camera now. It might have been around for a minute. I haven't looked up the timeline or anything, but like they were still in the early stages of it.
I want to say that Dracula was one of the very first really big, like at least horror, like talkies that came out, and they, kind of went from there. So, I was surprised that I actually liked this movie as well as I did. I've heard about it for years. I was like, okay, this is, it's voodoo zombies, whatever. They're not my thing. I'm Romero zombie, that sort of thing. But watching this, they actually did a pretty good job of, like making it. It's got that Dracula vibe to it that kind of fits, like you said. It's kind of interesting. Anything else you want to say about it before we get into trivia?
No, let's go to trivia because I'll save everything for my final thoughts.
Okay. Was a personal favorite movie of Bela Lugosi, according to his son, Bela Lugosi Jr.
That's wild. You would have thought, because he's known primarily for Dracula. Maybe he was sick of hearing it, though. Maybe people would go up to him and speak to him in his fucking Dracula accent, and it was just like disrespectful or just got on his goddamn nerves,
It probably was, and I mean, that was his accent, and I mean, it's not even like a true like Romanian accent. It's more like his own personal accent, but that's what was accepted as, Romanian after that, Dr. Brunner's line, "I'm a preacher, they think I'm a magician," was missing from the restoration source print and had to be duplicated from an inferior, grainier copy in which it had never been cut. Bela Lugosi did some of the directing, according to his son. According to the friends of Bela, the actor always regretted that he had taken the role of Murder Legendre for only $800.
That was probably a lot back then, though. Just kidding.
It was, I mean, it would have been like a few thousand, but that's still, true. I mean, speculation on the exact amount the actor was paid generally ranges from $400 to $900. After Lugosi turned down a percentage of the film in favor of a flat salary.
Oh,
yeah. An associate of the actor claimed $5,000 was deposited into his account after the movie made so well, but still, Lugosi was bitter about the whole thing and felt underpaid for how much the movie actually made. In later years, he was when the subject of the unexpected box office surprise was broached, he would scratch his palm and ask where the money was.
I'm sorry, Bella. You have to make better choices. Because there's snakes in Hollywood, and they will take advantage of you. This had to be one of those things that happened, and it doesn't sound like he learned a lesson because he was doing movies for such a low price after this. It's like you didn't advocate for yourself.
This is the second time he did it. He did this with Dracula and got fucked over. It's like you would have thought that he would have learned from the first one,
You think, and so you can't be bitter about it because that's you, homeboy. Get some better representation or fucking advocate for yourself.
The film was thought lost until its rediscovery in the 1960s. A court battle was fought between the distributor, Frank Storrs, and the estate of Stanley Krelberg, the copyright owner of the film. Storrs had wished to produce a restored version, but the estate refused him access to the original footage. Storrs gave up the court battle and did not win his access to the original film footage.
Wow.
Not once is Bela Lugosi's character name Murder Legendre actually pronounced by anyone at any moment in the film, nor does the character name appear on the screen once in the credits or otherwise.
So how do we know his name is Murder?
Well, I think they mentioned there's a line that says something like that his name means death or something like that. So, but I think they might have took that name from like maybe the script or something. Like, I don't really know where that came from. Shot in 11 days.
Wow.
Completed in March 1932. This is believed to be the first film to identify its antagonist as zombie. So it's the very first zombie movie, period.
Wow.
The film did a lot of shooting on rented space at Universal Pictures, and sets, props, and furniture from classics such as The Cat and the Canary, Frankenstein, and The Hunchback of Notre Dame can be spotted by astute film fans. So that's why it looks as good as it did, because they were just reusing props from big-time movies.
Okay. That makes sense why, to me, it just looked so familiar.
Bela Lugosi's character name Legendre means the son-in-law in French. It, however, in no way, shape, or form translates to legend in French, contrary to uninformed assumptions. Simply son-in-law and nothing else. It sounds like it would be legend, though.
Yeah.
So, I mean... famous comic book artist Carl Banks was inspired by the scene in which the zombies were working in the mill to create the 1949 classic Disney story Voodoo Hoodoo. So there you go. Rob Zombie, of course, named his first metal band White Zombie after this movie. The play Zombie opened up in New York in February 1932, and the author Kenneth S. Webb sued Edward Halperin and Victor Halperin, the film's producers, for the movie rights. The Halperins won the case. The play's star, Pauline Stark, who was directed by husband George Sherwood, was disappointed at not getting the part in the film, but it's understandable given the litigation that was going on. They didn't want that association between the two of them.
Wow.
The Halperins chose another silent film star, Madge Bellamy, obviously, as the lead. And that guy didn't have a right to even try to sue on that because like they were pretty different. Like, I mean, it was laughable that he even tried to get money for that.
Yeah, but that's just how Hollywood is.
It is. 2 years later, Black Moon, another film with voodoo theme, would feature a voodoo song whose first notes are very reminiscent of the first notes of the intro credits. Voodoo Chant, White Zombie. Clarence Muse starred in both films, so it's kind of like they were stealing from each other at that point, which they do. The voodoo chanting that plays over the opening credits is sampled in the song El Imperio del Mal by the Spanish rock band Megala. Or Mihala, however they say that. I don't know. You tell me how it's pronounced. I don't know.
Miala.
Miala.
Mm-hmm.
Sets from The King of Kings at RKO Path Studios were used for the interior of Legendre's castle. In addition to the black actors, yes, this production used white actors with blackface. I mean, you could tell because I'm pretty sure the voodoo zombie master that they go visit in the movie is a white dude. He sounds like a white dude and black makeup. In some shots, you can see the actor's breath. This is believed to be the result of shooting late at night to keep the production on its tight shooting schedule.
Goddamn.
And it's really weird because zombies are not supposed to breathe, but hey, there you go. So
it was their souls leaving their body.
Yeah, that's what it was. It was the little angel trying to come back in or something.
Yes.
All right, final thoughts for this. What do you think?
I don't like old movies. But I'll give it a big but. It is 100% a classic. I did not know that a classic zombie movie existed because it's kind of, well, I guess Bela Lugosi is Dracula, and Dracula is a staple at Universal, especially in terms of Universal monsters. It's just kind of upsetting that they didn't include, I guess a little bit upsetting that they didn't include a zombie, but this wasn't our run-of-the-mill zombies that we have nowadays, though. I don't know. I'm torn on the inside on this. But yeah, I mean, everything looked good. The acting to me wasn't out of the ordinary for a movie this time. In fact, I think they did exactly as they were directed to. I just cannot get into old films. It was a snooze fest for me.
I totally understand. I'm not going to fight you on that, except to say that, I mean, I do like a lot of classic movies, and this one was actually enjoyable to me because it felt like it should have been like a Universal movie. Like, yeah, I mean, it did. It had that vibe to it.
Well, they used a lot of Universal props, though, it sounds like.
I mean, they did, and, they used a Universal actor and, Bella, so, I mean, it was... It had that vibe, and like I was really surprised that like I like those type of movies because I like the kind of seeing the start of like movies and how they like they did some of the things back then to get the effects that like now would be like stupid easy to do, but like I mean back then they were like how do we get these effects and these visual effects in the movie, how do we get like the stuff to happen in camera. Like I'm interested in all that stuff. So to me, it was interesting, but I was wondering how you would do with it since it's such an old movie.
Yeah, it's not my favorite. And I tried to enjoy it, and I didn't know this, and I don't know that I would have felt differently, but I'm like, why is this guy straight up a Dracula knockoff? And he even sounds like Dracula. I did not know that was his real accent.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of hard for him. I mean, even whenever it kind of died down a little bit later in life, he still had bits of it,
Yeah, and like I said, he can't be like held accountable for that. That's just his voice. That's just how he talks. But I was like, this is like I was getting annoyed. I'm like, this is such a fucking Dracula knockoff of sorts. I'm like, what is even happening here? I was struggling with this one film. I do like the storyline though. I do like the idea of the voodoo zombie. The control, it's not out of what we've heard, at least of what I've heard in terms of actual, cases of this happening. And I don't know, the only problem is the tale of two guys fighting, well, technically three guys fighting over a girl. One of them doesn't feel like he fought very hard.
And also to go back to your point, I mean, making the comparisons even more so to Dracula, the preacher, that's always looking to have a good smoke. He is very clearly a Van Helsing type in this movie, especially at the end.
100%. Yeah, it was hard to get past that for me.
But yeah, that's the part that I find it interesting that's the part that you didn't like because how creepily like the two men in particular wanted to just control this woman. Didn't like the funny thing is that I mean when you look at the implications of the movie, Beaumont just wanted Madeline to be his. Yeah. But then whenever he got her, he realized that he was actually in love with her as a person more than just her body.
Her beauty, yeah. Beauty
Legendre just outright said, no, I don't care if she doesn't talk. I don't care if she doesn't say anything to me. I'm going to get what I want out of that.
In fact, it's almost better if she doesn't talk. I don't want to hear her nag.
Yeah, that's the way he goes with it. And the implications of that, I mean, he's such a fucking bastard. I mean, it's, I think that's so interesting, though, for a movie that old, because, I mean, there's a lot of implications. And the movie audience was not above knowing those implications either. No. It's not, I mean, we like to make it out. It's like, oh, they were so chaste back in those. No, they were doing shit that, actually Gen Z is way more chaste than that generation was. So
yeah, and not only that, like back then we actually had to use our imaginations a lot more than we do nowadays. So you can imagine the shit people created in their heads.
Yeah, so I mean, them watching that, they were like, I mean, I'm sure there's people in the audience like, oh my God, this woman's getting, reamed out every night by these guys. Probably, I mean, to be honest, the way the movie's set up, if Beaumont had his opportunity to do anything with her, then I'm sure that Legendre, right after they got through doing the deed, had her come to his room and he took his piece too. He's just that kind of guy.
She was just one big cum dumpster.
Yeah, I mean it's just that whole thing about it, and the way they portrayed the zombies as actually being dead when the one getting shot at the end of it. I just find it an interesting step into the process of getting into the zombies that we know today. So
yeah,
for me, I would say it's a 3.5 out of 5 because I like this sort of movie, and I think this is a really good version of those type movies. What would be your ranking?
I would give it 2.5 out of 5 rotting corpses. I want to give it more for its originality. This movie did not feel original to me. It is, but it just isn't. It's like, we're going to do this, but instead of having vampires, it's going to be zombies, which is damn near the same thing. One of them eats brains and one of them drinks blood. Well, I guess this wasn't. She's not eating brains, but.
It's funny you say that because when we get to the next step in the zombie evolution, Romero's zombies are very clearly based upon vampires, and we'll get to that whole story when it comes about.
Yeah. So, I don't want to give it a bad score because I don't think it deserves a bad score. I didn't hate this film. It's just not my thing. So it's my personal rating based on how I enjoyed it, and it's not something I would watch again.
I would definitely see myself watching this.
Oh, yeah. I could see you doing that. I think Noah likes this film a lot, too.
Yeah, it's an interesting, like I said, you don't expect movies this old, to have this kind of even professionalism about them, really. I mean, that's weird to say because, Hollywood had to have started out with some pretty good stuff or it wouldn't have lasted. But it's just like when you go back that far, you're like, okay, some of this stuff has to be really shitty. And you get these little gems here and there. It's like, okay, that's pretty good,
Yeah.
All right, that's all for this episode. We'll pick it up again with the new version of the Voodoo Zombie that came out in the 90s because there was a weird resurgence, and we'll get into that whole history on the next episode. So with that, peace be with you.
And with your spirit.